now that we have the connection editor up, and Maya doesn't know how to connect the gamma into the reflective at normal. So it needs a little help. So that's why it's bringing up the connection editor. So what we want to do is we want to go to the gamma correct, which is on the left, and we want to go down to value, hit the little plus sign, extend that down, and then select value X. And then what we need to do is we need to come through the shader attribute, which is on the right, and come all the way down until we find specular Fresnel. Now specular Fresnel is basically this little check-on box right here. So we don't want to plug it into that. We want to plug it into the attribute underneath that. So that's what this KSN stands for, is this reflective at normal. And we want to connect it into that. And you can see right here, it plugs it in right in there for us perfectly. So we hit close, and now the connections have been done properly inside the hypershade. We'll minimize this. Let's bring the Arnold view back up, and now go back to let's break this down, and then I'll run the IPR, and then now it should roughly display, and you'll start noticing the difference really is in the highlights where the metal are. It's going to really start to reflect that, but it's not too strong. It's because currently, if I look back at my shader, is the weight for the specular is really low. It's not that high. So I'm going to crank this all the way up. Now that the maps are done properly, I can crank this weight all the way up to 1. And now if you really look at it, we actually start getting the properties of our can to display correctly. And you can really start to see it along the top here, where the metal's being exposed through the paint, and you can see the highlights running through that. So it's getting there. It's definitely dialing in. If you think the reflection is still a little too strong, you can always go back and bring the weight down a little bit if you think it's a little too much. That's not a problem. So that's how you're able to dial in the specular. Now there is something else that I'm noticing. Let's actually move this over, and if I actually go over here and select my sky dome light and turn on the rotation for that light, and I'm just going to rotate that light just a little bit so we get a little bit of the stronger light source in the HDR to really start to hit the side of the gas can. And then I'm going to slightly rotate it a little bit. Our normal map is not displaying correctly. It's just not perfect. So what I'm going to do is I need to change the parameters of the normal map to display correctly for Arnold, because right now it looks like it's bumping out instead of bumping back in. So Arnold's just not reading that normal map correctly. So I'm going to close out the Arnold renderer, and I'm going to select the can. And I told you sometimes the viewport really starts to throw things off. I could turn off the textures on and on. Sometimes if you go to the previewer and you go to Arnold viewport 2.0 or render viewport 2.0, if you go to like default, sometimes that fixes the problem to display. It does gray it out just a little bit. It's not perfect. And then let's go back to viewport. Yeah, it's being a booger about it. Sometimes it just Maya needs to restart, and sometimes it displays the textures correctly. Anyway, let's go back to the shader for this can, and let's go back to the bump node. We'll go to the attributes, and we can't do anything in texture node because it doesn't know it's a normal map. But if we click on the next output of the chain for this normal map, which is this icon down here, click on it, and we get to the 2D bump node. There is a Arnold rollout right here. Click on that, and then this displays the normal map correctly. So right now it's flipping the red channel and the green channel. So that's probably causing our problems. So let's bring the Arnold view back up, and really quickly let's do the R channel, the red channel, and see that, ooh, that's already looking better. So it looks like it's already going in, but it's still not shading correctly. Let's do the green channel, and there you go. So right now, for some reason, these two attributes, the red and the green channels, were flipped, which were flipping the values in the normal channel, not displaying correctly. Now it is. So now we've got a really nice shader that's being applied to our object. So we've got the normal maps displaying correctly and the specular maps dialed in correctly. And you can start to see in the shine, you can see a little bit of that roughness coming through right here. So now you can see, the little letters I put on there, you can start to see those a little bit better. And it looks a lot more accurate in the way it should. So now if you want a more accurate render, a few things you can do. Let's click on it. Something that you could always play with is diffuse. Right now the color and the weight is set to 0.7. That's default. That's what Arnold does and Maya does by default. So if you want the colors to be a little bit more intense, you can crank this value up just a little bit more to dial that up. So that could add a little bit of a color boost to your render if you wanted to change the weight up a little bit more. The weight for the specular might be too much. You might want to drop that down to 8 or 0.7. It all depends. This is where you sit there and you dial it in to what you want it to be, and you can really start to see the properties along the top where you get a little bit of a curvature to the model, and it's picking up the highlights and the reflective tendencies of the surface. Now you could also go back to the light dome and change the parameters and increase those values. I'm going to pause it right here and let it render a little bit more. Now I'm back. Let's stop the render. So I'm going to go to render, run IPR so it doesn't keep running it if I change any attributes. So you can come into the light properties. In here you can increase the resolution to get a little bit better light quality and increase the samples. So you can play with those parameters to get a better render. And then, yeah, so those things. And then you also can play with the render settings and increase the resolution under image size, increase the resolution to a 1K or even HD format. So right here you can go HD 1080 or 720, and there it goes. I'm going to run IPR, and there it is, and get that to render properly. So again, those are the settings that you need to know to bring something that you've textured inside of Substance Painter or even Designer and plug that into Maya and get it to render properly inside the Arnold renderer. So I'll talk to you guys next time.